if you learn a set of valuable skills with using your hands in the trades as a craftsman, you will always be able to feed your family. I think about money in different phases of life. When you're young, you're just trying to make some, you're trying to get some, right? Uh, you know, when my dad was around, he had a little long haul trucking company, which basically just meant he had one truck and he, you know, drove around the country. But one thing I do recall talking to him quite a bit about when I was younger was because he was always buying all kinds of tools and like he built a little extension off the back of our garage, like a shop, um, and he would always say, "Yeah, I could write that off," and so I was in like that concept was kind of ingrained. And then my mom worked full time at this big commercial government type construction company down in Seattle, and so so we were, I grew up in early days as a double income, kind of no parent, right? The dinks. Um, Dad was off driving and mom worked out of town. So my brother and I, we were latchkey kids, right? Which just means we got up in the morning, um, basically on our own, went to school, got home on our own, and then dad was always gone and mom, would show up, 6 o'clock in the evening. And so we're pretty much on our own. And so the idea of that early on that, my dad was like this crazy ass entrepreneur, always wheeling, dealing, investor kind of guy. And so how I saw money early on is of course you had to have some kind of business, and that's the only way you could take advantage of the tax code. And so I got that in me. I got those ideas kind of ingrained in me when I was young. And so that's what I always dreamed of, and my model was always to be, jet rich and anonymous. I didn't, I don't need to have my name in lights and, be front stage and all that. And that's why a lot of ways, like this transition from being very quiet behind the scenes, and moving into sort of front stage in teaching, which I've always loved to teach. Um, but we always just did it in small environments, right? In small taekwondo studio, a small grouping, um, little day or weekend seminar type of teaching or evening seminar teaching. So just really simple, easy things that I felt comfortable with in small settings, small groups. And so the idea of money early on was, basically you had to have a business if you wanted to win. That's what I understood. Now, my mom, on the other hand, it killed her because she worked full time, and then in the evening she had to, basically run the trucking business when my dad was always gone, and she freaking hated it, every aspect of it. Now, she must have liked the income component of it because that was just what my dad chose to do, and so and we didn't grow up in anything fancy by any stretch. Very middle of the road, lower to middle suburbia out in this little town called Kent, which was just farmland south of Seattle. And the house was unfinished. It was a builder that was going banco. My dad knew some real estate guys, and through the connection, found this house that was completely unfinished. Literally concrete basement, sticks, and barely finished upstairs. And that was the little house we moved into. My dad was on the road. I think I was about 5, and but it was middle income suburbia, I guess. And so I would say we lived, a pretty decent suburbia lifestyle all the way up to that point. And then my dad left. And then, that other income like disappeared, and he just disappeared to Alaska. And so you go from seemingly, um, family doing okay to like eating macaroni, beans and weenies um, on the regular, right? Top ramen and hot dogs. And so I could definitely see that shift because now, we're living on one income, my mom's income, and she didn't make a lot of money as being an office accountant, office manager type person at this construction company. And so, the mindset shifted a bit, and you go from being okay, it seemed like, to like really tightening the bill, couldn't do all the cool things, couldn't go, didn't travel, didn't do that much that it sounded like we were going to do and some of the vacations trips early on. And so this, and then my mom was just, grew up in a literally dirt floor type of home out in Wichita, Kansas. And then her dad worked for Boeing and got shipped out to the Seattle area. That's how the family got out here. And so they grew up, with parents came through the depression. And so super, super cheap, super tight, saved every penny, didn't waste anything, um, never wasted food, just like very, very strict, rigid, just where you kind of go from seemingly doing okay to like now it's everything's kind of cut off. And so that was a very interesting kind of to see both sides of um, that kind of living where you almost feel like you had, and then now you're the don't have. And so the whole mindset was from pure scarcity at that point. My dad was like the abundance guy, and my mom was definitely the scarcity person, which, made sense, right? She now is single income. So that was the frame early on in my mind. Um, and then when he left, I that like just locked into me how quickly things can change. And so for me, it was like, I'm going to figure out, and my dad's big deal was always like, if you learn a set of valuable skills with using your hands and the trades as a craftsman, you will always be able to feed your family. And to me, like that was one of the most incredible pieces of advice early on. And that's how I got into manufacturing. Was it because it was the definitely the highest paying uh, job, if you will, of any of those trades. And so that's why I got into precision manufacturing because I love the building stuff. I love jets and fighters and tanks and weapons and pretty much anything that had to do with military and protecting the U.S. And so that was an easy draw for me to move into that space. But the money part of it, like I said, thinking about money is you have to think in phases of your life. And the thing I am, again, because I'm in this phase now where I'm really um, counseling, consulting my own kids, that are in their mid late 20s on how money works and how, and they've obviously been around me forever and, talked about all kinds of things, but, they grew up in a, pretty nice lifestyle. And my big thing for my kids was that, I didn't want my kids to be spoiled brats. And so we moved out to a very rural area and, low middle income community, amazing people, amazing community. But like you said, I didn't want to really ruin my kids. And, come to find out later, it doesn't matter where you are, where you're born, where you're raised, it's, uh, your kids can get ruined or you can ruin them wherever you live or whoever you are if you're not teaching them proper, how the systems work and so forth. So for me, everything that I've done, especially thinking about money, has been how do I put things in a very specific model so it's easily transferable to my kids, meaning not the cash itself, but the model, the concept, the idea on how to actually think about money in all these various phases.